Pick up on that, Mr. Fuchs. There is a problem with timeliness, and I agree with Senator Nelson that passengers will use the service if it's on time and reliable. And amen about the Acela. I have to go to New York every now and then, and it's a whole lot easier on me just to walk right in there. Amtrak, the law says Amtrak has preference over freight transportation using rail and using a rail line. Now, Mr. Fuchs, you talked about statutory directives. You agree that's a statutory directive, do you not?
Yes, Senator. Preference is in statute.
Yeah. Okay. So, in reality, freight railroads have consistently denied such preference to Amtrak. In fact, only 47% of long-distance trains were on time at stations in FY 2017, and this is largely attributable to freight's refusing to provide preference to passenger rail. For the routes that travel through my home state of Mississippi, it's even worse. Based on this reality, do you feel that host railroads are, on average, following the law? The law states that if Amtrak and a freight railroad cannot agree on terms of an agreement for Amtrak to assess freight railroads' rail lines, the Surface Transportation Board, quote, shall prescribe reasonable terms and conditions for that access. So, Ms. Schultz, it's more than a partnership. There's a statutory directive there. So, Mr. Fuchs, can you tell me what you think the reasonable terms and conditions are with respect to Amtrak? And given Amtrak's recent on-time performance report card, what do you believe, why do you believe some railroads are performing better than others?
Thank you for the question, Senator. On the first element of the question, I think that reasonable terms and conditions are case-specific. In fact, there's a case pending before the board that's being adjudicated for a number of years on that exact point. The reasonable terms and conditions are dependent on the particular route. As a general note on on-time performance, it's linked. And preference is linked to board investigations under the statute, and the STB attempted to regulate on-time performance, and that rule was actually vacated by the Eighth Circuit. And so the FRA Amtrak joint rule is currently pending before the DC Circuit, and depending on the decision there, I think the board would assess what action to take from there. And whatever action the board took wouldn't be necessarily categorical for the rail system, but it would be based on a complaint for an individual line. So I would say that I would be hesitant to make a sweeping statement, and I would evaluate any case that came before the board from a fair and open perspective.
Okay, well, I think you know where at least two members of the committee are on that. And then following up also on the Gulf Coast rail line, are you saying, Mr. Fuchs, that the role of the STB is going to be limited to whether a filing takes place with regard to this Gulf Coast rail service?
Yes, Senator. If
Okay.
the host railroad and Amtrak could not agree on mutual conditions for the restoration or initiation of service, then a party could come before the board, petition the board, and ask the board to prescribe, as you mentioned, reasonable terms and conditions. It's based on those filings and the evidence that are submitted by both parties that the board would make its decision. Okay.
Well, you've been very helpful at the committee level, and I won't prejudice your decision after you're confirmed. One other thing, the STB's primary function is to serve as an arbiter when there's no effective rail competition. In several recent decisions from the STB, board members have commented that the board's principal method for resolving disputes, the stand-alone cost method, is not effective and needs to be reformed. You're familiar with this, aren't you, Mr. Fuchs? We passed legislation more than 2 years ago requesting that the board find new methods for rate disputes, and yet we have not seen any meaningful reforms. So what about this, and can each of you commit to make it a priority to actually follow through on the legislation that we passed to find a better method of determining the cost? And I'll start with you, Mr. Fuchs.
Yes, Senator. And I agree with you that improving dispute resolution processes was a significant component of the STB Reauthorization Act of 2015. I see kind of three different actions that the board should be thinking about here. First is that the STB launched an advance notice of proposed rulemaking, taking a look at whether or not there were alternative methodologies for small shippers. Second, the board convened an internal rate reform task force trying to take an expansive view of the lay of the land about all possible alternative methodologies. And third, the board's been working on whether or not they can elevate and improve their alternative dispute resolution processes as an alternative to litigation. So certainly, if confirmed, I would collaborate with other board members and work hard to see if there's a better way of doing business on rate cases consistent with the board's statutory authorities and sound principles of economics.
We have time for Ms. Schultz. Answer. Ms. Schultz.
Yes, Senator. I recognize the importance of the pending regulations before the board, and I'm also aware that some of them have been outstanding for a fairly long period of time. I'm also very much still learning about some of these very complex and challenging economic principles. And what I do know is that we do have an internal task force that's been assigned to work on some of these issues, and I very much look forward to working with them, as well as obtaining much more information about these very important issues from stakeholders, and addressing and ultimately resolving some of these issues.
Okay, well, just be aware, both of you, after your confirmation, that the law, signed into law by the President, directs the board to find new methods of rate disputes. Thank you. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.